Okay, so and Peter's work is what we're going to explore today with whatever questions you have. And I'm actually just now thinking to get people warmed up just for a few minutes and Mark, I will do that, to send everybody into just a very, very quick sort of 7-minute breakout room with one other person. To talk about why are you here? What is your connection to money work? What are you interested in? You know, why did you show up? Have you had any experience with either Peter or myself or anybody in Peter's field? Because there's obviously a lot of people who are now doing Peter's work. But as I'm getting the rooms ready, Peter, do you want to say just a few words of greetings and sort of what you're busy with at this moment in time?
Well, it's called Ask Me Anything, but I don't promise to be able to answer everything. So I just want to start with that. And what I'm busy with, well, actually, I've been busy with things on so many different levels in the last few days, from a group with really deep spiritual work to a reunion with alumni from my business school from 40 years ago, who are on a very different level, most of whom are not like me, but pensioners now, and dealing with some property business. So it's been in so many different levels. I'm not sure where I am right now, Nadia.
So busy with life, full of life,
yeah.
as usual, Peter. Wonderful. So I tell you what, to get us warmed up, we will now do the breakout sessions, but really it's just 7 minutes. So don't be afraid, you'll be there with one other person. And really the question is just, why are you here? What brought you here today? What interests you about this work? What are you already doing with this work if you are working with these approaches? And then we'll come back here and you will hopefully bring all of your questions. So that might be another question for the breakouts is, what are your questions? And we'll see you in a little bit. So see you in 7 minutes.
Yeah, maybe I just recap a little bit what I've shared to you. So basically, I was working in a company, and I brought in my friend into my field at that company, and when he was in my field, we created we started working in a new way of how to lead teams. And after we've been doing that for 3 years, he had the idea of making it into an actual method that we could spread to other teams. And so my question is, I think that he's the source of that initiative of like taking it, making it into a method and spreading it to the other teams. But how does it work? But I still feel this like strong source connection to it. And I think it has to do with that the method was created while we were in my field. And I think my question is like, yeah, is Victor, so that my friend, like, is he the full source of this method? And if he's not, can he become that? Like, what does it take for him to be able to become the full source? Or will I always be connected to this method? Yeah, like put questions. I don't know, is that clear enough of a question for a starting point?
As a starting point, it's clear enough. And of course, you gave us a bit more information with names and so forth. But one additional piece of information you've just given, which you hadn't given before, was that you were in a company when you created this.
Yeah.
And you're no longer in this company?
Yeah.
So there could be a certain relevance in that too, but we'll skip that for the moment. And the short answer is, and maybe it'll lead to further questions, is that as the source of the field, you remain source of the field. And he has a role which sounds like an ambassador role for the method that you are a source of originally. And the only way he could become source in taking your position would be by a succession process. But until or unless that happens, you remain source. In other words, you're holding the field, and you're holding the field, and he is within your field. Even if he's occupying a very, very, very important position, it's still within your field.
Yeah, maybe that, because I was talking to this about another friend, and we took the example, like, if say he was saying, like, say I have a company, and then some really, like, with a technical expert comes into my field, my initiative, not my company, and builds something. Can that person then not take that product out of the field and become source of that product?
Yes, but it doesn't sound like that's what happened here, because you referred to yourself as being source of the method.
But I don't know. That's the thing. I'm not sure I am, because, like, so one way of describing it was that I brought Victor in, and the field that I brought into, like, I was hired by this company, and then I had the idea of, like, I can hire my own team. What if I hire, like, the best people I know? And the kind of what we're trying to do is, like, how can we like, make the most epic team experience no anybody has ever experienced, kind of. And I asked them in, like, do you want to be my subsource in that with me at this company? And from that, this method came out. But like, there's so much of the method that is his, like, thinking, and it's kind of like, it's, yeah, it doesn't feel clear that I'm, like, the clear. It more feels like that he's, yeah, I don't know, I'm confused.
So but what you're describing is that you held the space for him, or not?
What do you mean by that?
That you invited him in.
Yeah.
So it was taking place in your field.
Yes.
So you held, that's what I mean by holding the space within which this creation occurred.
Yeah.
And that is yours.
But then back to, like, the example I said, if somebody comes in somebody's field and creates a product, let's say, can't they be the source of that product then, even if it was created in somebody else's field?
Yes, and this is where it comes to the fact, I think the doubt is something related to the fact that you were part of a company. So you may not be acknowledging the source of the company. Because you were part of their field, of that person's field, when you created this.
Yeah.
And of course, you stepped out. Now, one could ask, why did you step out? Or why were you asked to leave, in the sense that maybe you were no longer part of this person's vision or field? But it feels to me that somehow this is related to your question.
I mean, I feel like, I don't know if this is true, but I feel kind of that, like, a lot of the stuff that we were doing weren't really invited. It felt kind of like we were doing our things. It felt kind of like I was creating an own field within. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of complex reasons to why I left the field, and I'm not. It doesn't resonate with me that it has anything to do with the confusion that I'm talking about, but I'm open to that being the case.
Well, the way you're describing it to me feels like exactly a mirror. You know, ignoring all the details of why and all the reasoning and the personal stuff that may have been going on.
Yeah.
It's like you were part of somebody's field and you created something and then left.
Yeah.
And now somebody's in your field and there's some doubt about whether they can leave or not, and the relationship to you if they take it out. And you know, the reasons may be completely different, but there's a certain, that's where I'm referring to the mirror. There's something there around your uncertainty, which may be related to your relationship to the previous field you were in, which may possibly still require some action of some sort. I don't know. In terms of acknowledgement of the source of the field that you were in when you created this, in the same way that it would clarify your relationship with your subsource here. I don't know, I may be superimposing something here which is not true, but
I really like what you're thinking. Like, I think it's really fascinating. I'm just like, in this case, it feels like this specific thing, like this method, was created kind of despite what the source of the other field wanted, not as a part of what they were sourcing. So it felt kind of like we did it like as a rebel thing. That the source of the field really didn't know what we were doing, and it really didn't have anything to do with it. So but maybe it's still connected.
Yes, I have a sense in terms of the, you know, whether you were rebel or not. That's what I meant about the relationships here. The uncertainty you have right now may be related to the act that you took to step out. In that case, with a rebel relationship, but ignoring the sort of relationship, just the how do I want to describe this? Ignoring the quality of the relationship, it's the kind of relationship from one field to another field to another field.
I think there's something here, and like I won't go into the details because
it's
of
not
reasons,
necessary.
but that's really helpful. I think there's something there.
Nadia, do you want to put something in?
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking, funny, since you're also an expert in reclamation work, right? If there's something about owning that you are a disrespectful rebel or something like that.
I think there's probably things to reclaim. I don't know if it's exactly that, because I liked being a disrespectful rebel, I think, but there is probably something to reclaim for me here.
Well, and it might be worth looking at, Fanny, what does the guy under whose umbrella you sort of birthed your rebellious cell, what does he think about you in his darker moments?
Yeah. Was that a question?
Well, if an answer pops up spontaneously, then yes. Otherwise, it's something to for dinner. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think in his darker moments, he probably thinks I'm naive and too not business-minded enough.
Naive and unprofessional.
Yeah.
How does that sit?
I had a lot of like I did a lot of reclamation work in relationship, like at this place. So it's like, yeah, I have the, yeah, it's probably not fully reclaimed, but it's one I've really been working on.
Yeah, and at the other end, you have the reverse, you see, with I think his name was Victor. You know, he's the reverse of the naive and unprofessional, I think, for you.
Yeah, maybe in some ways. Yeah, this is interesting.
So Fanny, what's your gold nugget takeaway for now? This may not be complete, but where are you taking this?
I think like a general, like when there's confusion, like look upstream. Yeah, and that like I think there's a bunch of other questions I want to ask as well, but like let's leave space for others as well. But yeah, I take away to get clear, that like getting clear upstream, I think things will just magically become more clear, even without really understanding how.
So to generalize from the source point of view, you know, there's really no need for looking downstream for Victor to leave your field if he's not a rebel, or if the vision of his vision, realizing his vision, can sit well within your field. So there's no need for anything other than that he continues to work on his vision. Nothing else needs to happen. And you still are source and take credit for having this happen in your field. And you still give him your blessing for what he's doing in your field. So unless there's something there within his vision which wouldn't fit in your field, there's no need for anything to happen, as I see it.
Yeah, and I didn't ask because I want him to leave. It was more like from to understand how source works, if that makes sense, and kind of to understand, yeah. But it's interesting, yeah.
So if he's totally happy and realizing his vision in your field, it couldn't be better for both of you. That's how a good source-subsource relationship works.
All right, Fanny, at this point, I would love to wrap this up just so that we can open the floor for a few more questions. But, you know, maybe you come back next time and tell us how where you landed with all of this. It would be amazing to hear.
Yeah.
And all of best luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fanny.
Okay, so let's see. I had one person write to me in the chat. Nancy, are you with us right now? If yes, then unmute yourself or raise your electronic hand.
I am here.
Okay.
Hi, Nancy.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm walking to my dentist appointment. So
a lot of people walking today, but
yeah, we're being healthy with all of our bodies. So my question is around, like, I love using reclamation work in my work, but I feel nervous about like being careless with it, or like I'm not a psychologist. And like, what if it dredges up trauma for people? Those kinds of things. Like, how do I use it well and not hurt people, or I don't know, make it too scary? You know, something around those lines. Heather and I were having a conversation about this earlier, so she might be able to clarify it better.
Right. So my answer to this is the following. First of all, is to not claim. I mean, I think you're a therapist, aren't you?
No, I'm just a coach.
You're a coach. Okay, just a coach. Okay. So you've been trained as a coach. I haven't even been trained as a coach. I haven't been trained as a psychologist. I haven't been trained as a therapist, and I never make any claims of being professionally authorized in any way. In fact, I deny the fact that I have been, and I find that an advantage. So if anybody really needs deep therapeutical work, you know, I would always recommend that they go to a trained person. But actually what has happened is that I've had so many therapists come to be trained in this work that I think the best therapists around are those that have been trained in the reclamation work and in the source work. And they are, I would say, at a higher level, a better level qualitatively than, generally speaking, people who have just been trained in therapy. But having said that, and having made no claims, we do, of course, touch the relationship to money, particularly can touch very deeply, very quickly. And my experience, at least, with the reclamation work is that even if you make mistakes, you know, in the 30 years I've been using reclamation work and experimenting with reclamation work, I don't think I've ever seen the reclamation work do any damage. And the reason is that if you are not so well, you know, attuned in it yet, and it does take, you know, there's a development time. I encourage people to start it as soon as possible and make all the mistakes. And having said that, what I've seen is that it doesn't do any damage, because if you're not accurate with your, let's call it your diagnosis and your suggested reclamation, nothing happens. So the only thing that happens is that you start looking like a fool, maybe, but actually for the person, there's no damage, there's nothing occurring. But if you do touch something, then you've touched something which is, you know, for them, which we can continue, you continue to work with. So that's my general answer. And so far, I think it's worked. I can claim that, and it worked pretty well. Maybe Nadia, you certainly have something to add there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, because you know, on the one hand, I would underline everything that you said, Peter, and right. So from my perspective, I also don't think that I have damaged anybody. I hope with the reclamation work that I have done, but at the same time, I do think that it is a very responsible thing that we're holding in this space. So what I would suggest for anybody who doesn't feel completely on safe ground because they're not a trained therapist, for example, is to just tread lightly, right? So Peter, you have a tendency to really also push people quite, you know, you're very cheeky and you can be a real pain in the behind, to be honest, right? With people and their reclamation work, but also you have 40 years of experience with this, right? So my suggestion would be for anyone who's a bit newer to this, hold it more lightly. So I make offers to people. And if I feel that there is a part of them that really, really pushes back against something, I don't try to break people. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's not my intention in this. And I think if we hold that with, I'm making an offer, and if I feel that something in the person I'm talking to comes alive through the offer that I make, then I continue. And if the only thing I meet is a wall of steel, then for me, that's a signal of, whoa, okay, I'm not going to go there, right? So that's the one thing that I would add. And the other thing is, of course, and Peter, you say that over and over again, I think you can only ever become very skillful at this work when you really take your own development and your own reclamation work very, very seriously. You know, to give you a quick example, I had a group of entrepreneurs this past weekend, did money work with them. And interestingly, we landed at a spot where somebody was beginning to talk about a path that I then named for him as his inner psychopath, right? And there was a lot of shame around this initially. But then I realized I'm not afraid of that part, right? Because I can relate to that. I know this side of me too. So I really egged him on a bit. And we started having all of these fantasies, how he throws people in front of the bus and, and chops them up into small pieces. And he was having a ball, and there was the energy of a 5-year-old. But if you can't go there, then don't go there, right? Because and if the client notices you get afraid and you get all terrified by what might come up, that creates unsafety. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, beautiful.
Nancy, any other thoughts or comments you have around this?
Yeah, I think I had an experience that shook me a bit. And so I may be gun shy since then. And I've chatted it through with Tash, who's kind of been mentoring me in reclamation work. And she pointed out that the question I started with was about someone else. Like the reclamation we were doing was people leave me. And that's not an accurate starting point, I think, for it. And so learning how to set it up well, I think, is good. And then I think, like you say, like not going for the jugular.
Yeah, but let me ask you, Nancy, if with what we just shared, Peter and I, if you were to take that onto a meta level, and if you can name what the practitioner did that you feel, looking at this with a little bit of distance, you maybe would like to handle differently if you're working with a client, then what would it be?
This was me working with a client. I was leading someone through that. So I'm realizing like I wasn't setting it up well.
So, what you need to look at, if you were touched by it yourself, you can't work with the client yet.
Right.
So this is maybe the lesson here. So if you feel that, the client is touching on something which really, touches you deeply, you have to say no until you've dealt with it yourself.
Right. But is it also that it has to start with like a me statement? Like I leave people rather than people leave me? Like, does it need to be more personal?
Well, in my basic training, my basic master classes, I'm using, a format which is I am. I am this, I am that. But actually, I encourage my practitioners to play around with this, and if a statement like "people leave me" is what needs to happen, to be free to come up with other statements, of course, like this. But the main message, I think, is that what I've found over the years is that when I notice I'm being touched by something, I do the work myself first, and very often I've been able to do it quite quickly, even before I see what the phrase is that could help the person, and then I go, oh my God, I need to work on this one myself, and actually I can say it to myself, and I can maybe run it through before I've even presented it. But if I feel I'm still, in not neutral with it, then I have to say no. I need to work. I can't work on this at the moment. And I think that's what's to be conscious of, really.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Nancy, any more around this, or does that feel complete?
Yeah, it feels good for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, everybody, if you have a question, at the very bottom of your screen, there is a reaction button, and you can raise your electronic hand. That is actually the easiest way to do this. And while we're waiting for people to think about whether they want to raise their hand, Peter, I actually find this question, though, really fascinating. And I've had it with other people in this field as well, this whole because I do think that reclamation work can go incredibly deep, and it can touch very, very sore points in people, right?
Yeah,
the problem
absolutely.
is that not always, for example, when people come to CU Money, I sort of presume they're mentally stable-ish, right? Like you and I, and they can take care of themselves. And if they need anything else, they will say so. And my hope would be that if they know that they need therapy, they also seek therapy. But that's not always the case, right? So I've had people join CU Money, and then I realized in the first process of working with them, whoa, that's a hornet's nest. And it's more than what we can hold in this particular format, because CU Money is not a therapy course, right? And I think those are the things that can happen. So how would you deal with somebody like that in the moment?
It's a very tricky question, Nadia, and thank you for raising it. The way I've handled it in the master classes, because this has happened in my master classes, where we've made it clear in advance that it's not a therapy, that it's a training, a professional training for people that want to do this work. But then you can't know in advance, and the person can't know in advance, the depth with which, something related to money can touch so deep that it does require, what Nancy is talking about. It's like traumatic and maybe does require a traumatic treatment. The way I've moved forward with this is actually to be more choosy about the participants. In other words, I say choosy, putting them through more questions before accepting them. I don't know if you want to do with that, with money, with CU Money.
Yeah, that's a bit difficult.
Yeah. But otherwise, I think it does come down to suggesting, if you don't feel capable of handling it yourself, to suggest going elsewhere to handle specific things that do arise. I think that's the only suggestion I can make. And maybe, in our field, there are therapists who can work on specific issues, because usually the issues that come up are quite specific issues. They're not sort of general. There's not a general trauma or something like that. It may be related to a marriage, or it may be related to something deep that money is throwing up in other ways of relationship. And maybe if one can see what specifically it is, one can refer a person to make a good suggestion as to where they go if one is not capable of handling oneself. That's the only thing I think I can really suggest.
And what I do see as a difficulty is, for example, in CU Money, right? We don't have an entry level exam or questionnaire. People join because they're attracted to the program. So I don't have a way to test where are they at in their own understanding and personal development, etc. And what I've noticed, though, is with what I said to Nancy earlier, I would say with 98% of all participants, that's good enough, right? To hold it lightly, to not dig too deep if I feel somebody's really pushing back quite hardly, to enter some humor into the conversation, I also find helpful. However, then there is the 1 or 2% where I notice that, for example, we are touching a point of deep childhood trauma around abuse or severe forms of neglect and abandonment. And sometimes, and I think therapists know that as well, right, is you find a client or a patient that is in a way so attached to the trauma, because the trauma is all they have in a way, right? Their entire identity. And then I can recognize that a part of them is afraid, if I let that go, if I resolve that, then what's left of me? And who's ever going to say sorry for me having been through this awful experience? And so I think there's also a little bit of a giving ourselves permission and being kind with ourselves as a practitioners to say that can happen. And I can hold the person lovingly if I feel that they're at risk, then to, stretch out a hand. And I do that with CU Money participants as well. And ultimately, though, I'm not responsible. Like, I cannot carry that life.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think you're describing it beautifully again, Nadia, and I really appreciate I can tell all the experience you've had with that. I can only say that, of course, I have the experience in my money seminars for over 30 years with this, but it's a bit different because there I'm with the people for two days or so, whereas you're with them, you're over a period of several months, and that does make a difference, of course. So I think the way you're handling it is really excellent, and all one can do, really. I mean, one can't ask for more. But what you're saying is also correct, that people, in a sense, even a trauma can be one's comfort zone. One can be more comfortable being in trauma than dealing with the fear of leaving it, because one knows it so well. And there it's like a double-edged sword that one's dealing with, because the person is asking to come out of it, but actually is more fearful of coming out of it than all the fears that they're dealing with in staying within it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there, we do our best with the reclamation work, but it's a real challenge, and I think it's a real challenge for any trauma expert too.
Yes.
I wonder if they've even asked themselves, trauma therapists are even presenting the question that we're dealing with here in the room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's see, because I know there are a couple of therapists at any rate in the room. I'd love to know if I could.
I'd love to hear some more opinions on this, some more thoughts.
Heather, would I be allowed to pin you? Can you just nod, because I can see your picture? Heather, can you hear me?
Like Heather Mackay, me?
Yes.
I am here, but I am no therapist.
Oh, no, so for some reason I thought you were a therapist. Okay, but I know that you were part of this conversation with Nancy, right? I'm still curious what came up for you in that conversation and your experience.
The thing that's on my mind most of all is actually how reclamation was introduced to us. And Peter, you may remember or not, we were in Masterpiece with Alexander, and you came in to teach us. And when you weren't always there when we were using reclamation, but Nancy, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but Nancy was really encouraged to go for that jugular. Like, it was very, she had a nickname of the Huntress, and in that group it worked very well, because that's why we were there, is to get to our core. And I think a couple of things have happened when you told us to use it as often as brushing our teeth, and we do. It has been fabulous as our own practice. I think what Nadia just said about being attached to the trauma is really poignant for the client that Nancy is referring to, who's somebody that I know as well. And that being lodged in their identity, and the fear of letting that go is leaving them locked. And then I think that leaves them at the end of the session in a vulnerable place. And that was kind of if I'm remembering correctly, this is kind of the feedback from this client. And so yeah, it's I think from my point of view, what I admire so much about Nadia's work, and I think Nancy would share this admiration, is what Nadia said about the lightness and the humor. Like, when I was in CU Money, watching her use it with her delicate, classy nature that she has, is just like it almost was two different practices, which I love having the example of both you teaching it and Nadia teaching it. but personality and experience and all those things and who we're talking to shines through a lot for me. So I'm really holding on to the tread lightly, use humor, and watch for that wall that comes up, and then maybe back off a bit.
That's beautiful, Heather. Thank you so much for sharing that, because you know, the finesse and the lightness and the finesse really does come through practice. And that's what brushing your teeth is about. And that's why I push a bit for all the practitioners to get into practice as soon as possible. And I don't expect them to be light. I expect them to make mistakes and to have experiences like Nancy, like you're sharing, and be pushed back and have all sorts of experiences, because those are important. As you continue, you become more, the quality goes up and up and up and up and up, and you become more and more finessed. And Nadja is just wonderful. I agree with you entirely. The way the finesse that Nadja shows is absolute. Can't beat it. So, but that's my aspiration for everybody actually in the field.
Yeah. One other thing I might add is that Nancy and I have sometimes worked together as, you know, in with people doing reclamation. And as we were learning, I found that exceptionally helpful.
Oh, yes.
As she follows the structure very well, whereas I get too lodged into like the questions and the person. And so she can bring us back to the structure, or I could message her in a chat as a word, like go here, go there. And it really worked well. So I don't know if that fits in with your practice, but that's what we did. And it seemed to work well.
Great.
Thank you so much, Heather. Okay, so Heather, I'm going to unpin you, and I will call on somebody, Peter, who you don't know yet. She's a very dear friend of mine and a therapist, Christine. Hi, Christine.
Hi.
And Christine, your touch point with reclamation work was really just you know, one session that you and I had, and I'd be interested though in sort of your experience and what you think about the conversation that was just happening.
Fascinating. I've been hugely engaged in it. It's been so interesting. I mean, I don't quite understand the language right now. Reclamation, source, what's all that about? I mean, I probably understand in my own way of looking at things, but in terms of these words, I'm a newbie, albeit I'm absolutely intrigued based on the conversation Nadja, you and I had, well, a couple of conversations really that were
and Christine, maybe to cut in there, so just to give you some context, so the reclamation work is what we did in the session, where we basically look at something that somebody has been trying not to be sometimes their whole life, and then to see what happens when I reclaim that part of me and reintegrate it into my identity. So that was our process. And I guess my question to you is really, as a therapist, you know, hearing that conversation about, you know, is it safe? Like, how does it need to be held from your viewpoint to make it safe?
Okay, so it felt really safe to me, I think, for a number of reasons. Number one, you and I have a relationship. And I think in any kind of trauma work, the relationship is key. I think the other thing is I was absolutely ready to have that conversation. I've been doing my own trauma psychotherapy on a particular issue for the best part of this year. And it completely teed me up to go there when you and I had that conversation. I think the conversation you were having about some people being attached to their trauma is absolutely true. It's taken me decades to get to the point I got to a couple of weeks ago. And so as practitioners, I think, you know, everything's okay. Everybody's process is their own process. We're not in control of it. And I think anything we do as practitioners will have its own will have its own impact, whether we know it or not. And that's okay. That's my perspective.
Great. And I liked what you said, Christine, that relationship is key, right? And of course, you and I were in the special context that we've known each other for, more than a decade. However, I think even if you only know somebody 5 minutes, right, there is a relationship, and we need to develop the subtlety to know how strong is that bond that we can form in a moment, right? And can it carry this conversation or not? And the other thing that you said that I really liked is about sort of the client's readiness, right? And I do think as practitioners, we need to develop these antennas to know when a client is ready, right? And we're not always on right, but we're pretty right, I think, if we pay attention. Yeah.
And I think if we come from a heart place, then people pick that energy up from us. They know that, we're not just, I think in other contexts, they may have had experiences of being taken through a process where that heart connection wasn't there. But I think if we actually come from love, if we come from a heart place, people feel it. They may not be conscious of it, but that's part of, I think, what trust is built on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. Okay.
Pleasure.
We are nearly at the top of the hour. There's still really interesting comments also in the chat. So if you haven't been following that, maybe have a quick read there. I'm going to unpin you, Peter, and myself, and just see if there are a couple of people that we can ask just as a checkout. What is a question you walk away, an insight you walk away with, a gold nugget you walk away with? And I'm gonna pick on Wolfgang. Hi, Wolfgang.
Hello, hi Nadja, hi Peter, hi everyone. Nuggets, there were many. I missed a little bit from the beginning, but I found all the conversations very, very engaging and insightful. And just this last question from Tom in the chat about the nature of consent is also, that's currently very present for me because I was just reading it, but I don't know if people who are not reading the chat know it now.
Actually, Tom, I'm gonna ask you to say a couple of words about that, because I think it's a really important point.
Okay. Yeah, very quickly, I think the nature of the kind of intervention of the reclamation practice, there is a relationship where, as the person guiding a client through it, you're the one seeing something in them and then guiding them through a process that you're very, very much leading. And so, and it can be, that's incredibly powerful. And I've seen it on myself and in many others. But the question is if and how you can truly consent to that. That's what I wrote in the chat, was that in advance, you don't know what's going to come up. Because can you consent in advance to a process that could open up some trauma that you weren't even aware of, or that you didn't necessarily want to go, have a desire to go there? So yeah, that's an open question, I think, for me.
Thank you, Tom. And actually what that brings up for me, and Peter, I'd love to hear from you as well, is I think you're right, Tom. I think there is something about the emergent nature of the process where, especially if you're new to this work, you just don't really know where this could go. Once you've done it a few times, you have a sense that you have an idea where this could go. But even more important, I think it is, as practitioners, to keep those tentacles alive and open, right? And to notice, is there a wall coming up where somebody feels, oh, suddenly the conversation I was having with Tom was safe until this point, but now it's not anymore. And then to honor that. And you can also ask, right? You can say, do you want to continue? Or is this a point where you want to stop at this moment in time? So we need to co-create this. Peter, any thoughts on that last point?
Yeah, I like that, and I love the way, again, that you handle that. This whole thing of consent, though, I just like to take it on to the other side as well, because I remember I had a whole phase where I was noticing, this this idea of minding your own business and getting consent all the time. And there are cases where actually it's quite good not to mind your own business and not to have consent and just go for it. So I don't want to be too one-sided on this. I understand everything that's being said and I appreciate it. And there are situations to have that freedom when you are so sensitive as you're suggesting, Nadia, to say, well, you know, this wall is there. And what do I do? Do I just back off because the wall is there, or do I test it out to see if it's really a wall or if it's just cotton wool?
You know, Peter, to that point, though, I think even there you can invite the other person to co-create that with you, and you can. And I've done that. I've said, you know, I feel this wall. Like, is this where we stop, or do you want me to go and penetrate that wall? Shall we do it together? You know, and then it becomes again a process of co-creation. Yeah. And maybe because that as a last point, because Peter, we've had conversations about this as well, this whole notion of safe spaces, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I learned from you that I really love is this idea that if you want to create a safe space, you need to willingly engage in being unsafe as well, because otherwise you create a fake safety that makes everybody in the field unsafe in essence, because nobody can be themselves anymore. So rather than focusing on always being, you know, always saying the right thing and never stepping on anybody's toes, look at our capacity and building our capacity for making amends and making reparations and falling down this pit together at times, and then figuring out we can still do this and I can still love you even though you really, really stepped on my toe, right? So, okay, Peter, last words from your end before we close this?
Oh, this has been extremely rich, I think. And thank you, Tom, for your comments and for everybody for your questions and sharings. I think it's been, for me, this, this is such a pleasure to do these Ask Me Anythings and the way you're holding them, Nadia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, everybody. And, you know, just to say, if you were new to this and your head is buzzing with all of these words that you've never heard before in your life, that's okay too. Yeah, that's one of the reclamation statements. I'm utterly confused and it's fantastic. So let's be confused together, and we'll do a little checkout ritual. I would ask everybody who's on camera to unmute yourselves, and even if you're not on camera, you can unmute yourselves, and let's make a little noise to say goodbye. And also find somebody in the tile next to you, create a connection via Zoom. Yeah, tickle some fingertips and say good night, goodbye, have a great day.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.